My mom took me camping, then left me alone in the mountains. When I was 15, my name is Sarah, and the night my childhood ended didn't look dramatic at first. There was cold air, the smell of smoke, and my mom shoving a cheap pocket tool into my hand. "Go get some real firewood," she said. "Not that wet stuff by the tent. Time for you to learn how to take care of yourself." I was half asleep, but I went. I walked off the little path, snapping branches, stuffing them into my arms, trying not to trip over roots in the dark. No flashlight, no signal, just my phone at 20%, and that dull little knife. I was gone maybe 40 minutes. When I came back through the trees, I heard voices near our tent. My mom's voice was calm in a way that made my skin crawl. "If she wants to make it," she said, like she was talking about the weather. "Ma, she'll figure it out." I froze. I thought I had heard wrong. Then I stepped out of the trees. The tent was half taken down. The cooler was already in the back of the car. My backpack lay on the dirt, but everything else was packed. "Very funny," I said, letting the wood fall from my arms. "You're not actually leaving me here?" She didn't laugh. She didn't even look sorry. She just picked up my backpack and tossed it toward me. "You say you're grown up, right?" she said. "Prove it." I grabbed the car door handle. She peeled my fingers off the metal like they were nothing. The engine started. The headlights swung past my face. A minute later, I was standing alone in the dark with a dying phone, a half-zipped backpack, and the sound of tires on gravel fading into the trees. I thought that was the worst thing my mom could ever do to me. 6 years later, she walked into my job, crying in front of everyone. And somehow, that hurt even more. Stay with me to the end, and I'll tell you how leaving me in those mountains was only the beginning. When the sound of the car finally disappeared, the forest got so quiet it hurt. I stood there for a long time, clutching my backpack like it might suddenly turn into a ride home if I held it tight enough. It didn't. My phone screen glowed in my hand. 15% battery, no bars. Just that little SOS sign mocking me in the corner. I told myself this was just a sick joke. A lesson. That my mom would circle back after she decided I'd learned enough. I waited an hour, then another. The sky slowly turned from blue to orange to deep purple. And the trees became black shapes. The air grew sharp and cold. No lights, no engine, no mom. Eventually, the cold pushed straight through my jacket. My fingers went numb. I had to move. I set my backpack down and checked what I actually had. Inside there were 2 small bottles of water, 3 granola bars, a thin hoodie, a cheap plastic rain poncho, the little multi-tool, no map, no charger, no real flashlight. I laughed then. It was a short, ugly sound that bounced off the trees. 15 years old, and my own mother had dropped me in the middle of Pine Ridge National Park with the starter kit for a school trip. I tried to follow the dirt road we'd driven in on, the one that led toward the main campground. But in the dark, every tree and rock looked the same. My phone flashlight threw a weak cone of light that only reached a few steps ahead. The true crime podcast my friends liked to play suddenly didn't seem so funny. In my head, I could hear one of those calm voices saying, Sarah was last seen at a small campsite with her mother. I forced myself to stop. If I walked around without a plan, I'd waste energy and get more lost. So I did what I remembered from the one outdoor class we had at school. Stay near one place. Stay where people can see you. Save your strength. I dragged some fallen branches into a rough circle and sat with my back against a wide tree trunk, knees pulled to my chest. The temperature dropped hard after sunset. Every tiny crack of a twig sounded like a bear. I knew in theory most wild animals avoided people. Try telling that to a scared teenager alone in the dark. I didn't really sleep that first night. I kept passing out in short bursts and jerking awake every time a leaf moved. In those half-awake moments, I heard my mom's voice over and over. If she wants to make it, she'll figure it out. People say things when they're angry all the time, but that sentence had been too calm, too neat, like she'd practiced it. Morning came gray and slow. My fingers were stiff, but they moved. I forced myself to eat half a granola bar and take small sips of water. I knew from health class that if I panicked, I might drink everything fast and then really be in trouble. For a few minutes, my phone showed 1 bar of signal. I opened a plant ID app we'd used in science class and pointed the camera at nearby bushes just in case. The app marked some berries as safe, some as unknown. I only picked a few of the safe ones, and even then I chewed slowly, waiting to see if my stomach would twist. By noon, I knew I couldn't just sit in one place forever. I listened. Far away, I heard water. I followed the sound until I found a narrow stream. The water was cold enough to make my teeth ache, but it tasted clean. I remembered my teacher saying, "Moving water is usually safer than still pools." Usually, a great word when your life depends on it. By the second night, the fear changed. It wasn't sharp and sudden anymore. It was heavy. I stopped waiting for headlights. I stopped imagining my parents coming back with some lecture about how I should be grateful they made me strong. I started whispering the thing I hadn't wanted to admit. They left me. On purpose. On the third day, my legs shook when I stood up. My lips were cracked. I had only one bottle of water and half a granola bar left. My phone was a cold, dead weight in my pocket. I followed a narrow trail along the stream, mostly because walking on an actual path was easier than fighting through bushes. That was when I heard them. Voices, not in my head. Real voices. Laughing. The clink of metal on rock. I froze. Then I dragged air into my lungs and yelled, "Help!" At first, the voices stopped. I thought I'd scared them away. Then a man's voice called back, "Where are you?" I stepped onto the trail, waving both arms. 3 hikers stood up ahead. Bright jackets, real backpacks with real gear, a GPS clipped to one man's strap. They stared at me like I'd dropped out of the sky. I must have looked bad. My clothes were dirty. My hair was a mess. My eyes felt huge. One of them rushed over and put a hand on my shoulder. "Are you hurt?" he asked. "Are you alone?" That was when I realized how bad it really was. I opened my mouth to answer. Only a cracked little sound came out. Another hiker handed me a foil blanket and a protein bar. While I chewed, they used a small radio to call a park ranger. I heard words like minor, abandoned, possible neglect. Hearing those words out loud made something inside me sit up. Neglect, abandoned. Those were big words, serious words. They made what had happened feel more real somehow. By the time we reached the ranger station, my legs felt like rubber. My brain lagged behind everything. The ranger on duty wrapped me in another blanket and asked for my parents' phone number. My stomach turned. I gave him my Aunt Jenny's number instead. When she pulled up in her old truck, she ran toward me and hugged me so hard my ribs hurt. She kept saying my name over and over, like it was some kind of apology. On the drive to her house, she told me my parents had already called her after the trip. They said I had run off to teach them a lesson. They told her I was being dramatic and would come home when I was done pouting. They had not called the park. They had not called the police. They had gone home, taken showers, and gone back to work. That night, in my aunt's spare room, I lay in a clean bed with a full stomach and stared at the ceiling. Getting out of the mountains had been the easy part. The hard part would be knowing that my own parents could leave me there at all. 6 years later, I was wiping caramel off a coffee counter in Portland when my past walked in and ordered a drink. By then, the camping trip was something I only talked about in therapy or anonymous support groups. On the outside, I looked fine. After the ranger station, I'd stayed with Aunt Jenny for a while. She believed me more than my parents did, but even she used words like misunderstanding and family problems, as if almost dying in the woods was the same as a loud holiday dinner. My parents' version of the story spread faster than mine. They told relatives I had stormed off and refused to come home. They cried about how worried they were, how ungrateful I'd been. By the time I turned 18, I was done. I took extra shifts, saved quietly, and moved as far as I could afford. Portland was far enough from our small Arizona town that I could breathe. I rented a tiny room in an old house with 2 other girls I met through an online support forum for people with toxic families. We shared rent and trauma over soup and instant noodles. I got a job as a barista at a busy chain cafe, the kind where your name tag spells your name wrong and your manager talks more about customer surveys than your health. It wasn't my dream, but it was mine, and I was safe. I blocked my parents on everything. Phones, email, social media. I couldn't erase them, but I could build a wall. When I needed to say something, I wrote online. Late at night, After closing, I'd sit on my mattress and scroll through an online group for people raised by controlling parents. Their stories made me feel less alone. One day, I made a throwaway account and typed my own story. I wrote about the trip, the quote, the days alone, the ranger station. Within hours, strangers had written back, "That's abuse. You didn't deserve that. I believe you." It was the first time anyone outside my aunt had said the words out loud without trying to soften them. For a while, that was enough. I told myself I didn't need to see my mother again. I just needed time. Then, on a random Wednesday morning, she walked into the cafe. I was half asleep, making drink after drink, when I felt someone staring too hard. I looked up. A woman at the front of the line looked like a sad, older drawing of my mother. Her shoulders were smaller, her hair had streaks of gray, but her eyes were exactly the same, sharp, measuring. My body reacted before my brain did. My hands went cold. My chest felt tight, like the air had turned thin again. "Next in line," my coworker called. The woman stepped forward, reached for her wallet, and said, "Medium vanilla latte, please." Her hand shook. I could have pretended not to know her. I could have switched with another coworker, hidden in the back. Anything. Instead, I said her name. "Paula." She jerked her head up. Our eyes met. For a second, I couldn't hear anything. No milk steamers, no music, just my own heartbeat and the echo of that mountain night. Her face crumpled, not pretty movie tears, full, messy sobs. People in line stared. My manager peeked out from the back with a look that clearly said, "Handle this." "We can't block the line," I said, surprised that my voice sounded calm. "If you want to talk, soon we can do it outside." She nodded quickly, wiping at her face with a napkin. I handed her cup to my coworker, told my manager I was taking my break. Outside, the air was cool and damp. She sat on a bench near the trash cans, clutching the coffee with both hands. Up close, she looked even worse. Dark circles, deep lines. She seemed smaller than I remembered, like half the air had gone out of her. "Sarah," she said, like my name was a question. "I've been looking for you for years." I stayed standing. That little bit of space made it easier to breathe. "You found me," I said. "What do you want?" She started talking fast. She said she missed me, that she thought about me every day, that the camping trip had been a terrible mistake. I asked her why she hadn't called the Rangers, why she hadn't called the police, why she had gone home and slept in her own bed while I was lying under a space blanket hoping not to die. She stumbled. She blamed stress, money, her own childhood. She said she had tried to make me strong, that she didn't want me to be weak and dependent like she had been. I listened, and the whole time, a cold, steady voice in my head did math. 15 years of being told I was too sensitive. 3 days alone in the wild. 6 years of silence. And now she showed up at my job, crying in front of my customers, asking for a second chance. "You didn't make a mistake," I said finally. "You made a choice, over and over." She reached for my hand. I stepped back. Her eyes flashed with old anger for a second. The same anger I knew from childhood when I dared to talk back. Then it turned into fear again. "Please," she said. "Just have dinner with me. Let me explain everything. We can start over." I almost laughed. "Start over," I repeated, like there's some magic reset button between Pine Ridge and Portland. "No," I said. "You don't get to pretend we're just a normal mother and daughter who had a small fight. You left me alone in the mountains. You didn't call for help. That doesn't go away because you cry at my job." Her face tightened. People walked by. Some slowed. Most pretended not to see. "If you come to my job again, if you contact me or my friends after I've told you not to," I added, "I'm going to file a report. I'm not 15 anymore. You don't control what happens to me now." I turned and went back inside. My hands shook as I tied my apron, but my voice was steady when I called the next drink. But I didn't know then that this was only the first round. She wasn't going to let go easily, and I was done pretending what she'd done was anything less than abuse. I wish I could say that talk outside the cafe was the end, that she went away and worked on herself and left me alone. But that would be a lie. For about 2 weeks, nothing happened. I went to work, I closed, I tried not to jump every time the door opened. I almost convinced myself she had heard me. Then the emails started. They came from fake names at first, weird addresses, subject lines like, "Please read." Inside, there would be long blocks of text. No paragraphs, just her heart spilled all over the screen. She wrote about how hard her life had been since the accident. Her words, like, "I had just tripped," and the camping trip had somehow been an accident. Or she said my dad, Tom, had never really supported her and had left 2 years after I moved out. She said my little brother, Jason, had dropped out of college and stayed in his room all day. She said she lost her job because she couldn't focus, and no one understood. In between the sad lines were sharp little cuts. "You ran away from your family. We're all paying the price for your choice not to come home." It was like she was physically unable to write a story where she wasn't the main victim. I didn't reply. I blocked her email. She made a new one. When that didn't work, she sent me a request on a professional site I barely used. She added a note saying, "I'm proud of you," like she had any right to be proud of anything I'd done without her. She found my roommates on social media and sent them long messages about how worried she was, how I was not myself, how she was just trying to help her little girl. She even called my Aunt Jenny and asked her to talk me into meeting. Every new buzz made my stomach twist. It didn't feel like someone wanting to fix things. It felt like someone pushing their way back into a house I had finally escaped. One night, after a double shift and 3 new fake accounts messaging me, I sat on my bed and stared at my phone. I opened the website for the Portland Police non-emergency line. Part of me heard her voice in my head, mocking. "Who calls the cops on their own mother?" That part of me was 15 and scared. The rest was 21 and tired. I pressed call. I told the woman on the line I'd been left alone on a camping trip as a minor and that I had moved away, but now the parent who did it had found me and kept contacting me after I'd asked her to stop. She transferred me to an officer who handled family cases. He listened. He asked careful questions. Not once did he use the word misunderstanding. He said the camping trip itself would be something I'd need to report back in Arizona if I ever wanted to push it. That laws and time made it tricky. But the messages now, the showing up at my work, the contacting my friends, that they could talk about. He told me to save every email, every DM, every time she came into the cafe. Then he suggested coming in to file a report so they could give her an official warning. So I did. I took screenshots. I wrote down dates and times. I even got a copy of the cafe's camera clip from the day she broke down at the counter. A week later, I sat in a small gray office, hands in my lap, and watched as an officer typed my words into a report. Seeing mother and harassment on the same screen felt strange and right at the same time. For a while after that, things got quieter, but it wasn't real quiet. It was the kind of pause you get when a storm is still out at sea. One Saturday afternoon, Aunt Jenny called. She hardly ever called just to chat, so I picked up. She sounded worn out. "Your mom drove to my house," she said. "Pounded on the door, yelling in the yard about how you sent the police after her. She's saying you're trying to ruin her life." Then she said something that made me sit down. "And someone," she continued, sent her a link to a story online that sounded familiar. My brain jumped. The post I had made months ago. The one that had gotten popular on that forum. I hadn't used names. I hadn't said which park. But I had mentioned mountains, Arizona, the quote. Apparently, that had been enough for some cousin or family friend to put the puzzle together. Jenny sighed. "She's telling everyone she was just trying to toughen you up," she said. "She keeps repeating that line, the one from the trip. If she wants to survive, she'll figure it out." My aunt paused. "And there's something else you should know," she added softly. "Something about when your mom was little." She told me that when my mom was about 11, their own mother had left her in a big public park for hours because she talked back. No phone, no watch. You had no idea when anyone would come. Their mom went shopping, had coffee, came back smiling like it was no big deal. To her, it was a lesson. My mom never really got over it. "She decided that's how you make kids strong," my aunt said quietly. "She told me once she wished someone had done it earlier with her. I think when she did it to you. She thought she was passing on some kind of strength." Hurt people hurt people. I had seen that phrase on posters and online. Hearing it wrapped around my mother's childhood and mine made it heavier. It didn't make what she'd done okay, not even close, but it did make a certain terrible kind of sense. A few days later, my mom emailed again. This time, instead of just begging or accusing, she asked to meet one last time and promised to answer anything honestly. I said yes, but only under rules. In public, daytime, no touching. My choice of place. We picked a park with open spaces and lots of people walking dogs. When I arrived, she was already on a bench, holding a paper cup. I sat on the other end, leaving space between us. I heard about when Grandma left you in the park, I said. She flinched. Then she laughed a short, hard sound. Of course Jenny told you that, she said. She told the story like it was a script, how no one came when she cried, how scared she was, how angry, how she decided that day never to depend on anyone. Then she looked at me, eyes shiny. I didn't want you to be weak like me, she said. I wanted you to know you could survive anything. You wanted me to survive, I said slowly. So you created the danger yourself. She opened her mouth, then stopped. Do you hear how that sounds? I asked. She looked down at her hands. You keep saying you were trying to help me, I went on. But every choice you made put me in more danger, not less. Leaving me in the mountains, not calling anyone, lying about it, showing up years later and pushing into my life when I said no. That's not love. That's control. She didn't argue. For the first time since I could remember, she actually looked lost. So what now? She whispered. You just never talk to me again? I thought about that 15-year-old girl by the stream, about my 21-year-old self making coffee and shaking when the door opened. What happens now, I said, is you stop trying to walk back into my life like nothing happened. You respect that I don't feel safe around you. You work on yourself with a real therapist. Now, not through me. She nodded slowly. Tears filled her eyes again. Can we ever be normal? She asked. No, I said. We can't. Maybe one day we can be something. But it won't be what you want, and you have to deal with that, not me. I stood up. If you keep sending messages or showing up after this, I added, there will be more reports. That's a boundary, not a threat. Then I walked home. To Jung, on the way, my phone buzzed with a new email from her. I didn't open it, and I didn't know yet that she was about to cross that line in a way that would give me all the push I needed to start telling the truth, louder than she ever had. I didn't open her email that day. It didn't matter. She found another way in. A few days later, my roommate knocked on my door, phone in hand. I think your mom messaged me, she said. On her screen was a long, dramatic DM from my mom's account. She called me unstable. She said I had run away from a loving home. She claimed she was afraid I was getting involved with dangerous people online. She asked my roommate to keep an eye on me and let her know if I was okay, like I was a lost pet. You can block her, I said, my voice flat. I already did, my roommate said. I just thought you should know. That night, I lay staring at my ceiling again. Blocking her felt like trying to bail water from a sinking ship with a cup. As long as she had her version of the story, she would keep using it as a crowbar. I remembered the ranger, his official words on paper, abandoned, neglect. I remembered the strangers on the forum who told me this was real, that it mattered, that I wasn't crazy. And something clicked into place. If she was going to keep twisting the story in private, maybe it was time for me to tell the truth in public. I started small. I reopened my old anonymous post on the forum and added more details. Not names, not locations, just the pattern, her quote, the 3 days, the fact that she never called for help. The comments flooded in again. Some people were angry on my behalf. Some shared almost identical stories. A few wrote things like, I thought what my dad did was just strict parenting until I read your post. Now I think it was abuse. Then I did something that terrified me more than the mountains had. I opened a short video app on my phone. I set it to record. I pointed it at my hands, not my face, and I started talking. When I was 15, my mom took me camping and then drove away with all our gear, I said. She told someone if she wants to survive, she'll figure it out. I talked about the nights, the stream, the hikers, the ranger. I didn't give my name. I didn't say where. I didn't point fingers. I just told the story. Then I hit post. I thought maybe a few hundred strangers would see it. Scroll by. Forget. Within a week, it had hundreds of thousands of views. The comments were full of small blue hearts, caps lock anger, and personal stories. This is abuse, not parenting. My mom left me on the side of the road once. I still have nightmares. You telling this helped me finally call my therapist. A few people accused me of lying for attention, but their voices were drowned out. For the first time, my mom's version of the story wasn't the only one floating around, and people were listening. Curious and nervous, I finally did something I'd avoided for years. I typed my mom's name into the search bar. It didn't take long. New town, same state. She had started a small online shop selling home decor and self-care products. She had pages full of smiling photos and long captions about never giving up on your kids and family first. Every line felt like sandpaper. Some customers loved her. A few said she was slow to ship, didn't answer emails, or was rude. I didn't need to ruin anything. All I had to do was tell the truth in the right places. On the same app where I'd posted my first video, I made another one about how sometimes the people who hurt us the most hide behind perfect images and inspirational stories. I didn't name her, I didn't show her face. I just described the pattern. In the comments, people asked, "How does someone just walk away after leaving a kid like that? Aren't there consequences?" "Yes," I typed back. "There can be, but only if we stop keeping their secrets." Then I went to her shop's review page. I didn't write anything wild. I didn't tell people to attack her. I left one careful review with my real first name. I gave 3 stars and wrote, "The items arrived, but I feel it's important to know that the person running this shop has a history of serious emotional abuse and neglect, including leaving her own child alone on a camping trip as discipline and never reporting them missing. Customers may want to think about this before supporting the business." Then I closed my laptop. For a few days, nothing obvious happened. Then I started seeing small signs. A former coworker of hers commented on my video, saying her story about teaching a lesson sounded very familiar. A distant cousin messaged me, saying they had always thought something worse had happened on that trip, but were shut down whenever they asked. Someone sent me screenshots of my mom's latest post, where she was now complaining about online bullies and being canceled by her own child. She even made her own video. In it, she cried about how I had twisted the truth, left out my own bad behavior, how people were ruining a good mother over one mistake. In her rant, she accidentally repeated her old line, "If she wants to survive, she'll figure it out." Viewers grabbed onto that sentence fast. The comments underneath shifted from, "You're such a strong mom," to, "Wait, you actually said this? You left a kid alone in the mountains and call it one mistake. Ma'am, this is not okay." She started deleting comments. She turned comments off on some posts, but the screenshots were already out there. Her follower numbers slipped down. Some customers asked public questions on her shop page. "Are you the person from that camping story? Did you really never call the police?" On one of the platforms, a new review appeared. "I can't support someone who admits to abandoning a teenager and calls it tough love." Other people added their own stories about late orders and rude emails, small waves, building. Watching it all from my small room, I didn't feel like cheering. I felt steady for the first time in my life when she lied, when there were other people to ask, "Are you sure?" instead of just me. The hits didn't come in one big crash. They came in steps. First the comments, then a few of her bigger customers canceled orders. One small shop that used her candles posted a polite note saying they were changing suppliers due to concerns about the maker's behavior. She tried to defend herself, to argue with strangers, to blame me again, but people who weren't connected to our family didn't owe her loyalty. They only saw what she showed them, and what she showed them looked bad. A few customers took her to small claims court over missing items and refused refunds. I only found out because someone sent me a photo of a legal listing with her name next to "Failed to deliver goods as promised." Failed to deliver. That phrase fit more than candles. My aunt called, sounding more tired each time. She told me my mom's landlord had raised the rent, that with refunding customers and paying extra bills, my mom was falling behind. She told me my mom had been sent home from a part-time job for crying in the stockroom. That one night she'd said things like, they'd all be better off without me, and someone had called an ambulance. The hospital put her in a short-term mental health unit. When my aunt said psych ward, I sat down quickly. I didn't smile. I also didn't cry. I just felt empty. This was what I'd wanted, right? Consequences. For her to finally feel even a slice of the fear she'd dropped on me at 15. But hearing that she had actually broken under the weight of it all scared me too. Not because I wanted to run and fix it, but because it showed how deep the damage went. Far beyond just what she had done to me. After that, my brother Jason texted me for the first time in years. They put Mom in some hospital, he wrote. She keeps asking for you. I don't know what to say. I stared at my screen. I'm sorry you're going through this, I wrote back. None of it is your fault. But I'm not the person she needs right now. She needs real help, not the daughter she hurt. I turned my phone off and went to bed. Revenge, it turned out, didn't feel like fireworks or victory. It felt like finally telling the truth and accepting that there was no version of this story where everyone came out fine. I didn't talk to her while she was in the hospital. I let doctors and therapists do what they were trained to do. I went to work. I made coffee. I started going to an in-person support group once a week instead of just hiding behind a screen name. We met in the basement of a community center. Folding chairs, bad coffee, a circle of people who all had different stories, but the same basic headline. Someone who was supposed to protect me chose to hurt me. Sharing my story there felt different than online. Heavier, but also more real. Somewhere in that time, my first video crossed 1 million views. I didn't chase it. I didn't start posting daily for likes. I made a few follow-ups to answer questions from teens and young adults who wrote things like, my parents are like this, how did you leave? Or, is it really abuse if they tell me it's for my own good? I didn't give legal advice. I'm not a lawyer. I'm just a girl who almost didn't make it out of some trees. I talked about saving money quietly, about trusted adults, hotlines, school counselors, community resources. It stopped feeling like revenge content. It started feeling like a map. Eventually, Aunt Jenny called to say the hospital had let my mom go on a plan. She was meeting with a therapist, taking medication, and going to group. She wants to call you, my aunt said. The old voices in my head started up. She's your mother. She's sick. She needs you. But another voice, harder and newer, said, you don't have to go back into the fire to prove you're a good person. So I made a rule. One call, I told my aunt. On speaker, with you in the room. No secrets. When the phone rang and I heard my mom's voice, it was softer than before, like someone had turned the volume down on her whole personality. She apologized. Well, for the first time in my life, she said the words without adding but. She said she had told her therapist everything, that she had heard a trained stranger say child abuse and finally believed it. She said she had been so afraid of feeling weak that she became the exact kind of person who had hurt her. I believed that she was sorry, but forgiving and trusting are not the same. When she asked, can we start over now? I closed my eyes for a second, then told the truth. I'm glad you're getting help, I said. I don't want you to suffer forever, but my life here, without you, is not a punishment. I told her my small apartment, my job, my friendships, my new boundaries. That was my life. My job is not to make you feel better about what you did, I said. If I ever forgive you, it will be for me, not as a reward for you. And it might never mean we're close again. You have to work through that with your therapist, not through me. She was quiet. Then she said, I understand. Her voice said she was only beginning to. When we hung up, I didn't feel lighter or heavier. I just felt finished with something, not done healing. That takes time. Finished believing there would be some perfect phone call where everything made sense and stopped hurting. That call never came. What I had instead was a tiny room I paid for myself, a job that wasn't perfect but safe, friends who believed me, a heart that was still cracked but beating, and a stubborn desire to pull others out of the same kind of darkness. So I leaned into that. I kept going to group. I volunteered once a week with a hotline that helped people in family abuse situations. Sometimes if it fit, I shared a simplified piece of my story. Not the online drama, not the viral view count, just the picture of a girl in the woods who finally realized her mother loved control more than she loved her child. And the woman that girl grew into, who decided the story ended differently with her. People like to dress up what happened to me with nice phrases. Tough love. Hard lessons. Old school parenting. Here's what I learned. Love that leaves you alone and terrified on a mountain isn't love. Love that demands your silence so someone else can look good isn't love. Tough love, without safety, responsibility, and choice, is just abuse in a different outfit. If any part of this sounds like your life, I'm not going to tell you it's simple. It's not. I don't have all the answers. I'm just someone who got left in the hills and decided not to stay lost. But I can tell you this. You're allowed to call what happened to you by its real name. You're allowed to set boundaries, even if people scream and call you cruel. You're allowed to walk away from family if staying means losing yourself piece by piece. Revenge for me wasn't watching my mom's life fall apart. It was refusing to let her story be the only version of what happened. So if you're reading this and thinking of your own camping trip, whatever that looks like, I hope you tell someone, a friend, a teacher, a counselor, an online group full of strangers who get it. And if you feel safe enough, I hope you tell your story too. Because out there, someone else is sitting alone in the dark, thinking they're crazy and weak for wanting out. They need to know there's a path down the mountain, and that there are people waiting at the ranger station, ready to give them a blanket, a bar of food, and a different ending.